Are we? Now we're live streaming on Facebook, Andy. Well, welcome, mate. Wine and Wisdom, another Friday. Friday.
Happy Friday, mate. From
Friday.
the cold state.
Mate,
I know you'll be able to make it over the wall.
Mate, well, hopefully you're staying well down there in lockdown, mate. But to those dialing in to this evening, welcome again to another Wine and Wisdom, where Andy and I get to debrief on our week for those listening in for the first time. You know, Jason Witten's my name, 20 years in the real estate investment game, and Andy Fenton, my compadre, on the other screen, camera, whatever it is, in the banking world for 20 years plus, Australia, London, and New York, and the US. But we get to have a debrief each week. We catch up Friday afternoon with a glass of wine and maybe try and talk a bit of wisdom, talk a bit of sense into our week and our spaces. And today, Andy, you got a guest in. Cool to see. Great to see. You want to do the intros for Ennio?
Mate, well, I'm not going to steal too much away from Ennio. He's gonna drop little pearls of wisdom on us. Very well prepared tonight. He's spent months preparing for this engagement, so prepare to be scintillised. Scintillated, not scintillised. Jeepers creepers. How strong is this? It's only one in. No, Ennio's is, let's call him the pre-planning of property side of the equation. So a little bit of a forecast of what the next sort of 6 to 12 months worth of resi construction is going to involve, amongst other things. So, mate, I think that you guys will have a good conversation around about now. I've had a lot of clients, a lot of people in the construction game, and a lot of people just in general having a bit of a chat about, you know, how long is this going to last? What is going to be the impact of it? What is the impact of it right now? And the best place to sort of start with a lot of that is either in, you know, land banking or land planning, as you said, you know, with the shortages in the market. So Ennio spent the last month preparing a detailed PowerPoint presentation. I said, you can't hold that here. It's not the place for it. Mate, I think it's going to be a very good and interesting conversation. Just a news break though from Victoria down here in the magic tropical jungle of Victoria is that Dan Andrews announced today that he has a plan that is going to take Melbourne out of recession. We're going to build a wall to keep all of you buggers out. And that's going to create one of the biggest booms that we've seen in material and civil works that the country's ever seen. So, mate, the joke is on the rest of the nation who have been putting out those videos and those images about the wall. We're now going to construct it. Right? So we might be the Mexicans, but we've flipped it.
Turning it around, mate. Well, I hope the plan goes well, and I've got some real estate down there, so look after it. But you know, a bit in the news this week, a bit released. Probably Ennio can comment on this one too. The home builder boost, $25,000, encouraging the construction industry, you know, to get out there and buy a home and support jobs and get building. Has almost been oversubscribed by double in a very short period of time around the nation. It was 600 odd million, and it's $1 billion plus right now in subscriptions or applications for the $25,000 boost. And then what you're saying with Ennio tonight is maybe you're already seeing that flow-on effect in your world when it comes to construction. So one of the things for me, you know, been tracking the real estate game for a little while. We have a look at approvals, you know, years in advance, 2 to 3 years in advance, the number of approvals, increasing approvals, decreasing approvals, end up showing up somewhere. And for the moment right now, decreasing approvals across Australia in certainly the multi-density places. But right now, that builder boost is firmly kicked on the house building world. So, you know, what are you seeing then, Ennio, in your space? Like, give us the sort of the over the horizon radar of what's happening in your world from a, you know, pre-planning point of view.
Yeah, well, we and our figures are sort of, we're right at the front end. So with the soil test that we do in the surveys and engineering, our work is pre-approval. So our numbers directly correlate with what gets reported a month or two down the track generally. So if you hear in the news, oh, building approvals are up by 10%, we've normally experienced that 2 or 3 months before.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, when I got here before, I was just talking to Andy about even up until last week was a huge week for us. So it is up on numbers, which, look, I've got to be honest, when all this started, we shit ourselves like everybody else and thought, it's the end of the world, it's all going to do whatever. But we haven't had that let up in the numbers of starts. Now, part of it was at the time, we took a few days, got over that panic, and then thought, right, let's get on with it. So the volume builder guys that use our, that we service, they had quite a bit of back orders in their system. So when the shit hit the fan, it's like they might have had quite a number of months of orders coming through. So our work kept going.
Yeah.
But we thought that in time, it was just going to tail off because we couldn't see the sense in, well, for starters, you couldn't go into a display home because you just couldn't go.
Nothing was open, was it? Like nothing was open. How are they going to sell things, Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, I put myself in those shoes and thinking, well, it's not the sort of time that there's uncertainty going on. I wouldn't be going out to buy a new house. It just didn't seem like the right time. Yet the jobs kept coming in. But then with the stimulus that's been put in, it's actually ramped up. And we only represent a percentage of the market because we're consultants like there are other consultants in Victoria. Yeah. But our numbers went up. I've got to ask to try and put that in context. I guess it was probably around about, not quite 50% up, but close to that.
Wow. And so do you think, so is that still coming for you guys in that sort of space? Like, obviously right now, Australia's lowest interest rates we've ever had in I think, Andy, did we discuss this last time? It's actually ever in history. I think was almost ever in history. One of the largest dollar stimuluses for property construction ever in Australia's government history. That's another one that I wanted to bring up tonight. That size of actual cash stimulus is the biggest we've ever seen in Australia's history. So lowest interest rates, biggest cash incentives, and quite a pent-up demand, to be honest, from a first home owner point of view, certainly in that space. So it's not surprising, but, a 50% up is an amazing number. When, like you said, and you're thinking, okay, well, shit, maybe we're going to have to lay people off and hunker down and this is going to be a disaster. That's quite interesting because then, for me, I see the knock-on effect of that stuff, in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, there's things certainly going to have some positives and maybe in some negatives in some places, depending on how it rolls. But what else are you seeing in that sort of space, that you can sort of give us a bit of a early heads up on?
Yeah, I can't, apart from the stimulus itself, I was not understanding why we're getting the work and the numbers that we're getting. There just seems to be a paradox in that. And initially I worked out that, and it was reported that the volume builders who are our main clients, they were getting high levels of cancellation rates. So they were, I think it was reported at one stage, they're up to 30% cancellation rates, which were very high.
Yeah.
When you say cancellation rates, what do you mean?
Well, people that have come in, they've ordered a home, they might have put a deposit down, and then they change their mind. So in that respect, we got put under the pump because our clients obviously wanting to finalise stuff, get people in and get on with it. So I sort of understood the pressure that we were under work-wise with that, but I always anticipated this drop-off effect. I thought, all right, well, they're the jobs that are in the system. We've have to come off that. But this latest kick-up, whilst I've been very grateful for it, because it's, we've gone from me telling the team, well, we're going to cut down hours, half of you going, doom and gloom. And I'm not I'm not a pessimist. Like, I'm always optimistic with this stuff, and I try the best. But I was trying to be realistic, and we've had a turnaround where now we're currently understaffed, and we're on to overtime, and we're trying to get the work out. So it's been a complete turnaround, and I haven't been able to, aside from the stimulus itself, I can't pinpoint why that would be. I still can't quite grasp it.
This is why I say Enio's always been a genius. He places exactly the right talk at exactly the right time. So he scared the shit out of everyone, and now the productivity level is like through the roof at exactly the right time. The man's an unrequited genius.
So yeah, I don't. It is good what we're seeing. Like, we're good with that, but I'm not sure. But I can't forecast what's going to happen. But if we're doing those sort of numbers now, like we did about 200 new jobs last week. Yeah, they're actual houses that. That's 200 kitchens, that's 200 frames that have got to go up, 200 jobs that have got to be bricked up or whatever. So there is work in the system and coming.
Yeah, I mean, and the government, the government has used this sort of trick before. And, Andy and I were talking about that, last Friday. So, the government's sort of got 3 or 4 sort of versions of the world, and, stimulating the construction industry is one that has worked for them in the past. I mean, Andy, was talking about, okay, well, now they're looking at stimulating different sections of the economy instead of the broad, job keeper stimulus, and so potentially that's where it might all come unstuck, Don't even
get me started, mate. Don't even get me started. Let's have a look at the look. I'm going to government bash a little bit, but I'm allowed to because I'm a Victorian. We're not really building the wall, so we're not really going to any type of major recovery from what is the COVID recession that we're in. I heard Morrison actually say it. I think that was for the first time today that I heard Morrison call it the COVID recession. I might be wrong. He might have done it a few times before. It's the first time I heard it. But being a Victorian, a little bit pissed off with what's going on, and think a little bit of mishandling of how things are going. But when the government start to choose the parts of the economy that they want to tickle the stimulus under, it's a real danger sign for 5 years out. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So there's great opportunity in this, and as investors and business owners, we should be really, really aware of it. But ultimately, we should also be aware of what happens, because unfortunately, the government of the past, and probably the government of current, they come up with it. They're like an entrepreneur with no responsibility. You know what I mean? Like an entrepreneur who runs a business who just doesn't care whether the business goes bust or not. Like, I've got a great idea. Let's go and do this, everybody. And then you turn your back on it, and you come back, you go, what happened to that business? And so an example of that was a great initiative called the 2020 Project, which was the government, when the greenhouse stuff or the greenhouse emissions started to become topical, the government came out with the 2020 initiative, which was we wanted to see X amount of the Australian land repopulated with trees. And so they built this whole agricultural vision on it, and that's where they brought out tax breaks for tree projects and farming projects and walnuts and any type of nut, freaking ostrich, kangaroo. And I know they're not trees, right? But they thought across the agricultural sector, and they brought in all of these tax breaks and these systems and started stimulating heavily that part of Australia. And then they've gone, all right, job done. 1 year into it, passed all the legislation, went off and had a conversation in a different area. So what ended up happening was that what we've been talking about a lot over the last few wine and wisdoms is that natural arbitrage. And so the builders will create the arbitrage, like they will fix the price discrepancy of the stimulus. Yeah. And what we'll see is the government are going to tickle at the moment the film industry. So Morrison came out. I don't have the details on it, but I was listening to parts of it. They're going to tickle the film industry and give that a spur along. And I think that they need it. The poor film industry has been smashed from pillar to post and didn't get any of the JobKeeper. But the problem is when they choose which areas they're going to allow the stimulus to go into, the chances are they're going to choose it, they're going to give it to them, and then they're going to take their eyes off it. And it might stay for 1, 2, 3 or 4 years, which will create an extraordinary opportunity. but eventually will be, if history repeats itself, and as we know, it doesn't repeat itself, but it's a very good mimic. We'll probably see those sectors get bastardized, monopolized, and then ultimately probably worse than when they started. But in the interim, there's going to be extraordinary opportunity. So this one, just because we always like to throw a few little tidbits out there and hang our hat on a few things, I reckon you're going to see the re-emergence of some film funds. Remember the old film funds?
Yeah.
Trying to sell you an old film fund. Yeah. I reckon we're going to see the phoenix, pardon the pun, of the film industry funds. I reckon you'll see a lot of money go into that area. I think you'll see investment bankers and Macquarie banks in the world start to understand that's where the money's going to go, and they're going to start to create funds around it. So that's my hang the hat on it for this week, and something to watch out for. So we talked about the seasons of stimulus. Be really, really careful about where the government now are going to be pointing funds. And the other one, just as a bit of a point of contention, I'm on the negative track tonight, but I've been locked up again, so I'm allowed to be.
You've been locked down, Andy, and mate, it's good you got a mate there. Anyway, take care of him.
I haven't. I've just completely forgotten what that was now. I lost my train of thought. What was it? Oh, I'll come back to it.
No, mate. Well, listen, interesting stuff. Like you and I have been talking a little while about the lack of conversation in the marketplace when it comes to the commercial world. So commercial lending, commercial conversations when it comes to commercial real estate. What's the date today? 17th. So a couple of days ago, read the first article that I'll show you guys here. Non-bank lenders tighten their reins as sales decline. So this is talking about commercial lending, and this is the first conversation I've heard out there in the marketplace where lenders are saying we are not going to lend any money, where it says we will not provide any financing at all to these projects, which are, residential developments, commercial offices, retail space, all those sorts of things. Say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Is anyone?
Hello, mate.
Jake, he's come to say hello.
Hi.
So yeah, listen, for the first time, that conversation's happening where, the lenders are saying, well, this type of stuff, we're not going to spend any money. We're not going to invest money and lend in that sector. Not like ease back, not like, we'll analyze it a bit. We're not going to lend money in that sector. And so, for me right now, we're seeing the emergence of a couple of different things. The residential world maybe getting the stimulus, but the commercial, the world that you and I were talking about, not the specialist ones that are taking off. Some of that industrial stuff, some of that warehouse, some of that logistics stuff is getting some major benefits, but the other, properties are actually, I think, in line to suffer fairly greatly when it comes to, the next 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years, maybe even longer when it comes to this stuff.
But we saw this. We saw this in the GFC. We saw the same sort of behaviour in the GFC. And one of the things that my old man hangs his hat on, and will do every single day of his life and until he's here no more, and he'll spread it around the heavens as well, is through the GFC put a number of clients into commercial property, but it was because the banks weren't lending. And so for me, you look at that and you go, okay, disaster for commercial, disaster for these different areas, but you got to look at it and you go, well, there's smart money that will be syndicated into these areas, whether it's large syndications that become more public offerings that we can participate in.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. In the middle of the GFC, when most property trusts had an LVR of about 50 or 60%, and then they lost value, so their LVR blew out to 100 and 110%, and it just locked the whole property industry, just sent it into turmoil, and just froze every single property fund. People were just running away from property, and the old boy ran into property. And so this is an example. Because the lenders had stopped lending, they couldn't fund this project, and tell me if this is a good or a bad deal. Let's call it a $150 million development. 98%. No, I won't give you that. That's the best part. 14-year lease, CPI or 4.5%, whichever is whichever is more.
Whichever is more, yeah.
Whichever is more. Guaranteed renewal period after the first. So even though it was readjusted, it was guaranteed. It was obviously a brand new build. The loan to value ratio, so it was an investors funds of, I think, 70%, so 30% gearing. What else would you want to know about that deal?
I mean, already it sounds pretty tidy. What's the cost of the prime mortgage, the first mortgage? That's really the only thing.
Yeah, but what's the other risk?
I mean, is the tenancy the risk? So, who's the tenant?
The ATO.
Oh, that's a pretty good tenant.
And I think the first one was a semi-state government authority. So another example is what Malcolm Palmer, our equity specialist, said to me. He's gone, Andy, I've been through enough turbulent markets to be able to adjust my psychology that when markets are horrific and everyone's scared, I start to look for opportunities. When everybody's loving life and markets are great, I start to try and become a little bit more pessimistic. And he says that helps you manage your own psychology a little bit better. But I look at that and I think, well, there's an opportunity that'll come from that, because there was health. I think there was healthcare sector was one of the commercial properties that they wouldn't go into. Commercial industrial. Now, as far as I know, even though we've spoken about commercial industrial logistical, I don't think that they've separated that in broad terms of lending. I think that industrial is still qualified as logistical as well. So, mate, I reckon there's potentially some really good things that'll come of that. Some private projects with great tenants, great stories.
Yeah.
And,
well, I mean, when I first got into real estate, it was very common, if you wanted to get into developing, that you sought out, secondary or even private financing. The banks were like, we might give you some. Matter of fact, we don't even know you. We're going to give you none. But your project was still pretty good. There was profit in it. You had a margin. You purchased it well. You went to, a lawyer's fund. You went to, certain places that weren't banking, private mortgage funds and so on, and sort out that equity and that funding. So, that opportunity now is, again, I think, talking down your train of thought here, I think that opportunity is going to become excellent again. And also the cost of money, you and I chatted about this, if you've got some retirees out there with a few $1 million in their super fund or wherever in their retirement pot, and they're trying to get by on 1% or 1.5% from the bank, gee, I tell you what, they're going to seek somewhere a little bit more, lucrative for their money to be, or at least some of their money anyway. And, some of these first mortgage backed securities, if you're in at a 50 or 60% LVR and you're the first mortgage on a property and you're charging 5 or 6%, that's pretty good, especially if you understand real estate in the right way. That's bank position, and if the banks are not going to stump up the dough, then if you understand what you're doing with your money, or you're with someone who does, the opportunities are going to be fantastic, Andy. I completely agree. It's going to open up those opportunities for investors in that way. So, Mate,
how the initial effects of it are going to actually treat because I think the big losers here is, again, potentially small to medium business to a certain degree, because the big tenants have got their big leases, long-term leases, big companies, big balance sheets backing the leases. So as long as they're not going to start clawing, they just said that they're going to stop lending. They haven't said anything about
Yeah, so this is sort of your second tier lenders. You know, they're saying, well, listen, our appetite for that type of security is zero right now, and they've just decided they're going to leave. So, you know, the main banks are difficult when it comes, you know, difficult in bloody general. But you know, they've always decided to, you know, lend less, you know, be scrutinised more, and you know, this is probably, you know, my little bugbear in the world of lending. You know, you as a small to medium business owner, you get treated like poorly. You like for me or you as a business owner, we get treated worse in our lending than the people who work for us do, right? You know, if you've got a job, you get the best interest rates, you get the best taken care of. But, you know, small business Australia or medium business Australia, you know, we're providing jobs to, you know, millions of people. And you go to the bank to say, listen, I'd like to buy a home too. And then they kick you in the nuts for it, you know, and charge you 5%. Like seriously, I think that shit's broken, you know, like, you know, in the world of lending, that's fucking ludicrous, you know? So, you know, where is that, you know, sensibility in that sort of space in, you know, if we're going to rant a little bit about sort of governments and banks and bash them a bit, you know, let's bash them that way, you know, at the end of the day. But you're right, you know, the risk to small and medium business owners is pretty significant in this space. You and I have talked about this, you know, a number of times. We've had a few guests on before about sort of people making sure that they take care of themselves in that way. And, you know, the seasons of stimulus, you know, like you've been chatting over the last couple of weeks, is really important to understand, get that buffer right. Like, you know, business is a full contact sport. Property investing is a full contact sport. You get it wrong, the bank doesn't give a rat's ass that you know, you got a life and you're trying to get by. That, like, they're just going to roll through and nail you for whatever's going on. So, you know, you've got to take that stuff seriously and plan, you know, in and around, you know, for, you know, tough times, which you and I chat about, you know, all the time. But mate, yeah, absolutely, you know.
But I don't think that this is not a new thing like with the COVID. This has been over many, many years. They'll cyclically go around as to what they will retard lending on certain areas and certain aspects. So it's no different. And with the commercial space, can I jump in here? Is that right?
Yeah, feel like.
Yeah, like historically, like my upbringing, Italian background, like we're the bane of many jokes, because when the Italians came out, they just wanted to own multiple houses and wanted to, you know, get in the concrete and own as many houses as they could. So
have a few pillars.
Yeah. So real estate is almost in our DNA. It's just how we operate.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just a COVID thing. A couple of years ago, I sat back and had a careful think about, because before that, say up until 5 years ago, I thought, you know, office space, stuff like this, prime. You know, you get an office, get people in there, easy rental, great investment, blah, blah, blah. But if I go to the grassroots and even give you an example of what we went through, even in our own business, aside from investments, but we reached a phase where we were increasing team size. We'd reached the capacity of our building. So we're on the ground looking. The immediate thought was, right, we need to buy a new building. Let's go out looking for new premises, blah, blah, blah. When I look back on that, we didn't make that move. But at the same time that we're having those thoughts, we had people that were doing some of our work in Vietnam for us. So we were offshoring and outsourcing work. In looking at it now, like forward wind to today and what's happened with office space and people working remotely, I remember even 2 years ago thinking, well, if we've got people in Vietnam, surely we can have somebody in Geelong, somebody in Pakenham, these are outer suburbs in Melbourne.
Yeah.
What's so different? So, but our minds were channeled into that. No, it's got to be real estate. It's got to be real estate, whatever else. And we were just, you know, tunnel vision to that. But there is a change, but this is what COVID has fast forwarded the world. But we were heading that way regardless.
Yeah.
So when I look at that, and I asked myself that question a few years ago, as an investor, as a property investor, the goalposts have changed. So we can't go back in the day, 20 years ago, like whatever you bought, residential, commercial, industrial, whatever you wanted, in time, yeah, you had some better ones, some not so great, but overall, you moved forward and off you went. But you look at it today and you ponder the question, you know, and yeah, we've got some mega businesses with big distribution centres. We've got the need for office space, because now that we've tasted this working outside our office spaces, working remotely,
yeah,
like you have to question in moving forward where that space lies. So it may not be as an appealing an investment today as what it was perhaps 10 years ago.
yeah.
So we've got to, and this is why when I spoke to you before about, you know, some of this COVID stuff, it's like putting the fast forward on the TV. You've just gone, it's forced us 2 years in 2 months.
Yeah.
And we've arrived at a place that we were heading anyway. So I don't see the big issue of what's going on at the moment. It's just like, if you're in business, there's never been, and you know, one of my most piss off words when you talk about the unprecedented. When I hear that word unprecedented, it's unprecedented. How many times unprecedented gets used? It's just freaking annoying, because every day in business, like the next day is unprecedented. Like, you know, and there's never been certainty in business. So for people to want certainty in investment, certainty in real estate in today's world, it just seems to be a complete conflict. You can't get that when things are whatever normal is anymore. We don't even know. But,
there's no such thing, and that's the fairy tale of it all, isn't it? Like, if you're looking for certainty, well, don't get out of bed, you know, because the moment you get out of bed, everything you do is uncertain. You know, you can't drive down the road without the risk of, you know, someone crashing into you. You can't, you know, but you can't breathe the air without the risk of bloody catching COVID, whatever. Like, the uncertainty is part of being human, part of living, part of existing, you know, and certainly business and property investing. Gee, tell you what.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that, like, and I've got to be careful where my empathy lays in all this too, because if you're an investor, like if you're running your business or whatever you're doing and you're investing in properties, if you're going through a bit of a hard trot, like you're investing over and above the food that you need on the table and your family, whatever. So you've got to take a step back and get the perspective correct. Yeah. I'm more empathetic about people that, like, you know, like a tiny small business that's operating just to make wages, or a small cafe that the government's just crunched and closed it. But the investment sort of guys that you need to work it out with your tenants and go forward, like, there's never been certainty. Like, you can have the greatest property, you're getting whatever, your tenant goes bankrupt, the thing stays empty for 3 years, you're in exactly the same boat as where COVID's placing some of us now. So
absolutely.
To me, I don't see, I see this as a glitch in the system, the way it's been whatever other time. Like, I don't want to downplay it, but I'm also not going to overplay it either, because there has never been certainty in business. Otherwise, everybody would be in business. If you knew what was going to happen in 6 months, you make all your plans and off you go. Like, it's just not, it's not there. So if you're doing, like, now is not a time for doing stupid shit, but then it never has been either. So don't do stupid shit.
Probably just,
if you overcommit with this, like,
yeah, it probably just brings to the front, like, you know, exactly what you said. It's never been a time to do stupid things, and, you know, and that's probably, you know, a really, you know, a foundational conversation around business or property investing or any of that. Like, don't do stupid stuff. Like, you know, it just makes sense not to, but, you know, for many of us, the consequences have not been as serious in recent times as they are right now, right? Andy and I were talking about this a while ago. It's like COVID has really just, like, ripped the, you know, the blinkers or the blinders off many people. Like they're literally 1 week away. If the government didn't step in, there would be people living on the street. You know, if the banks didn't give people mortgage breaks, you know, those people who had those mortgages couldn't pay the mortgage past 1 week. Yeah, it's so crazy, you know.
I've got a question to ask. Do you mind if oh, you go.
No,
I'll write down my question.
Yeah, just a quick one on that. I'm not very political, but I will acknowledge and take my hat off to what the government has done and how quickly they stepped in and improvised.
Right.
Now, they've given these lifelines out. So as a business, like, we've been given the support. It is our role now to be educated on that and get the knowledge and set ourselves up. You know, we've been given the opportunity to set ourselves up, re-strengthen, redo whatever for what may come. Like, you can't depend on the government for the next whatever. But I've been in business 33 years, and this is the first time ever that the government has given handouts to people that needed it.
Yeah.
And I applaud it, because like I've just been paying taxes and just been paying BAS and just been paying. So for the first time ever, the government's giving back in supporting this.
Yeah.
And I do take my hat off to them, because, yeah, perhaps for some of us, we're like paying the dole through the businesses, but it is keeping those businesses and those people employed.
Yeah.
And it is a good thing. So, and for those of us that are not doing too bad, like the idea now is to utilize the time to set yourself up for what's coming next. So, you know, you plug a few holes of what's coming in. And yeah, I don't know, like to me, it's been a good thing. It's very positive. And the other thing I've noticed in all this is that if I was in my 20s and 30s and this happened, whatever you do, you'd be trying to turn, change, you'd be going hell for leather to try and sort something out. If you're later in life, you're sort of 40s and 50s and you get hit with it and you get put down, you sort of sit back going, oh shit, really? I've got to go through this shit again and reinvent myself and redo. And you're sort of at the tail end of it all. You have a very different attitude from when you're younger and coming into it. Because if you're coming into it, like I came into this, I remember one of my first dealings with the bank when I leased a car, and the lease rate was 19%. And that scarred me so badly at the time that I said to myself, because when I paid, I still had a balloon thing, a residual of 50% on the car, which was more than the car was worth after 4 years. And I promised myself on that day that I would never lease another bloody vehicle again. There'll probably be accountants that will disagree with me, but it's stuff that happens. It's eye-opening of what's going on at the moment. Sorry, I've interrupted you with your question.
No. Well, it brought me back to the thing that I forgot about earlier on. But the question that I had for you, Jace, was there's funny games being played now, and so this was a question from one of our listeners. They're now in a bit of an argy-bargy with their real estate agents. So we're talking about residential property, and we're talking about there was deferral. What was the name of the other one? Deferral or relief?
Relief, yep. And
one was to defer the payments, and the other one, relief, was to get rid of them.
Yep.
Basically saying you're not paying anything for this period of time.
Yep.
So first wins that I've seen of this, and as soon as I heard it, I just thought, yeah, okay, I know where this is going. So I'm not going to mention the name of the company. I might once we get wind from our lawyers, I might mention it next week. So if you happen to be in the Mornington Peninsula, fucking watch out if you're doing some dodgy stuff. Because I'm not afraid to name it as long as I'm not going to get sued. But tenants, real estate agents coming back to tenants and saying, oh, no, it wasn't relief, it was deferred. Have you seen this?
Listen, it depends on, it depends on how that got facilitated too, because, like we've got a colleague, who's having some challenges in that space as well, communicated verbally in one way and then literally had verbal agreement, and then when the written confirmation was completely different. So that's where it's really important for any of this stuff. If anyone's in negotiations in commercial leases or residential, anything like that, get it done in writing, because one thing said over the phone, often people are they call it passive aggressive. They're yes when they're talking to you because they don't want to start a fight, but when once the phone's hung up or whatever, they'll blow up and write something different. So I have heard of it, and it's happening a lot in the commercial space. In the residential space, I haven't seen it myself, but is this a residential lease?
This one's a resi one. So to be clear, and I can't remember the terminology now because maybe you guys can, but
if it's
rent
relief and you have agreed to reduce the rent, so rent relief from
that's what it was relief.
Then it's not payable back. It's just pay, instead of 500, you just pay 400. Yep.
And so the agents come and to my understanding, they've basically got the emails and things like that. So the agents come, to your understanding, noting that we're not solicitors and this isn't advice or legal advice, but to your understanding and my understanding, mine would be, yes, Mr. and I almost said the name of the business then. Yes, Mr. and you may be named. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Real estate agent. This is the original email. It says relief. Relief isn't deferment. You know, that's it. That's the brass tacks.
Yeah.
Well, a deferment is a deferment, and relief is relief. So,
it's really, yeah. I as soon as I heard it, I just thought, well, we're going to see a lot of this. Yeah. We're going to see a lot of it. Because well, people didn't, and it's kind of fair enough because people didn't. The reason why we started these sessions was because they were dropping legislation like a drunk person drops a cigarette. You know, like it's just. It was coming every week and 4 times a week at one point in time. And so everyone was struggling to understand the policies and wrap their heads around the impact and what it meant. But I guess it's no excuse for the paperwork that sits behind it. You agree to something, you agree to something. But I reckon that's going to be an interesting one that'll come more and more. I mean,
it's interesting when, you know, and like you said, like, you know, none of us are lawyers or whatever it is, but there are some sort of, you know, codes of conduct, some documents being released. You know, you and I have posted them a few times, certainly in the commercial space, you know, landlords, whatever. You know, it's interesting right now. And, you know, if you're going to have a dispute in this space, everybody has to understand what leverage they have in a dispute. And you know, there's very little to no leverage from anyone in these disputes right now. And there's no value in sort of having them from a commercial term. So, you know, at the end of the day, if that tenant has only paid $400 and the agent was thinking it was meant to be $500, and when are you going to pay it back? There's zero legal leverage from the agent over the tenant right now. They can't kick them out. They can't take them to court. They can't do anything about it. So, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, that is exactly the way it is. And, you know, a good lawyer would go, mate, don't waste money on me right now. Just don't do anything because they can't do anything to you. A poor lawyer, you know, tells them that they got to put $5,000 in my bank account and I'll argue the point for you, you know. So, you know, at the end of the day, for many, if anyone's listening in, it's encourage you to read a few things about the legislation and the code of conduct. It's actually very good reading. It's easy reading. You know, there's safety zones at the moment through the legislation the government's provided for, you know, for everyone as well. So, you know.
Yeah, it reminds me of some words my solicitor told me quite a number of years ago when he quite simply said that you can't set your rent beyond what the tenant can afford. And I remember listening to those words and thinking, well, shit, you know, if your business is only making X amount and you're trying to squeeze X amount of rent out of them, they can't cope.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work. It's going to shit itself for everybody. And we're in those times again because, like, I've got a multitude of things. There's like a restaurant that I have that they're not trading. So from a landlord point of view, the guy can't pay rent. So if I'm going to force that, I'm probably going to bankrupt him. And it's of no value to me in the long term. So you know what? Hey, mate, pay nothing for now. And there's no point deferring it either because these guys have to get back on their feet and get going. So to defer 6 months of rent in the hope that they're going to catch up within 24 months or whatever it is putting them under such extreme duress that their business is just going to shit itself.
Yeah.
So I would rather, as a landlord, you know, have that conversation, say, mate, right, well, you're not trading. Yeah, it hurts, but you're not paying rent. But the expectation is that when you do trade, we're back onto full rent again and off we go. Yeah. So you make those sort of deals and there's different, you know, some are going fine, some are not, some are on 50%, some are on 70%. But in these times, I think from a landlord perspective, like to lose a tenant and thinking that perhaps you may not get one for quite some time, why not have that negotiation, that discussion? Because everybody has to lose. So why not bring it to the table? You know, if people are on JobKeeper, their business is down anyway.
Yeah.
You're better off drop it if you can. The banks are on, you know, holding you out. So come to the party with it. But I'm aware, like even around here, I'm aware of some landlords that, you know, their tenants have been closed by the government. They can't trade, yet they're still asking for full rent. And these poor small businesses, that's where I have empathy, because to me that is just wrong, because we've all got to wear some of this together to sort of hopefully come out the other side. So
absolutely, that's wise words, mate. That's for sure. Yeah.
No, it's probably a good point that if you're listening to it and you know business owners out there, just when you have a beer or coffee, well, in other states, when you're having a beer or coffee with them, but if you're down in the sunny side of the country, which is Victoria, just check in with them and understand whether they're actually, where they're at with their lease agreements and whether they're paying rent. Because it was a good friend of mine in Blackrock as a pub jazz business up there, wonderful business, reasonably early in it, and as far as I was aware, they were still paying rent, and they'd basically been forced to shut down. So it was paying for it out of the pocket, and ultimately what that does is it robs from the war chest to re-establish the business, like you said, and that's a lose-lose.
It's very poor.
It's just delaying something that's going to happen later, isn't it? Really, it's you're like, okay, well, if you laden that business with more debt or another burden, it's just deferring, that potential failure for 9 months, 12 months, 18 months later.
To me, it goes against all the rules of real estate that I've lived by. That it's such a short-term perspective to, hammer people now. Like, you're going to put them out of business and you're out of tenancy. Like, seriously, look at the long term. I'm talking about Victoria because that's where we are. Like, we came out of it a few weeks ago. The places reopened, rentals started coming in again. Now we're back in a lockdown. But like, to put this extra burden on your tenants and whatever else, I just think it's harsh. I think it's very short-term, very short-sighted proposition. We got to come out the other side of this and work together. So I've never had more communication with the tenants and whatever else than I have lately, and everyone's in the same. Everyone's understanding. You show a bit of compassion, but you've also got to get at a point where some people are also taking the piss too. Like, it's got to be a legitimate. And we get that sometimes in residential. There'll be out of 20 people that are asking for relief, perhaps only 5 of those are actually legitimate and the others are taking the piss. So you've got to really sort of have those conversations and have that understanding of what's actually sort of, there's no point claiming all this stuff if you're not having genuine hardship, because you're rorting the system and it's going to catch up somewhere. It's
just kicking the can down the road. Someone's got to pay for it somewhere. Like, if everyone picks a little bit up and takes a little bit, that doesn't end up costing the hot potato holder the most, so at the end of the day, which is great, and it just speaks to values, and that's the three of us, in a community of people with high values, that's a beautiful thing in that sort of space. Certainly, I teach my investors that there's 2 very important people in your future once you've acquired your real estate. The number one is your tenant. That person's going to help you be wealthy in your future. Look after them. And if you've got to give them a break every now and then, you do that with compassion. And, the other person's your property manager. All the effort goes into purchasing, but, the value proposition is in the long-term owning of a piece of real estate, your tenant and your property manager, if you're owning, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, for sure. No, that's fantastic. Listen, Andy, what's going on in the world of equities? We talked a lot about property tonight. Anything to bring to the front in that sort of world? Any news? I mean, share market's been interesting. What shape have we got? The W, the U, the whatever it is.
We've got the W for the wonder markets, but it's not representative of the way that they've gone. As sort of stipulated, the US market's still continuing its kind of upward trend, although recently we've started to see the tech stocks get a bit of a hit. And, we talked about, a bit of a correction with the tech stocks because they've rebounded significantly.
Yeah.
But again, it's always got to be on forward earnings and what the price rationalization is. We've started to see some, and this is really peculiar because, and this talks to different countries with different views and different countries with different ways that they're treating the coronavirus. So in America, we actually saw United Airlines jump up 3 or 4% for the first time in quite some time recently, under the presumption that there's going to be a bit more coming back to normalcy over there. And so that there's a belief that that's what's happening over there. But, you know, the numbers around COVID don't necessarily show that. But here's the difference, is we need to understand what our numbers mean. And when I mean that, we've got to contextualise. So in Victoria, we had, 400 cases or something like that.
Yeah.
400 new cases today.
Yeah.
And so that's off the charts and reason for panic and all of that sort of jazz. But and then when you line it up with the States, well, the States are just now used to a significantly higher number. And in Poland, which is significantly larger population than what Australia is, Poland's been doing 300 a day pretty consistently for the last multiple months. So what the figures mean to different countries mean different things. And this is what we're starting to see play out in equity markets.
Yeah, right.
But I'm not sure if I talked about this last week. The forward-looking forecast for the US economy, based on the amount of stimulus that's been dropped, is now 5%. So this calendar year, or the year that's passing in the US from a financial year, -5%, but the forecast is for a +5%. So you don't have to be a genius to understand that, you know, that's 100% turnaround, and that's likely to be reflected in markets. And so still trying to fully understand that and comprehend it, but America looks like it could be a very interesting place to be, because we saw the initial stocks rally quite heavily. A lot of the tech stocks, and those graphs that we went through last week showed that most of the areas of the US were actually underperforming. And the techs really just drove them through. But what happens in a normal trading market is a lot of these other energy sector, because we're all using energy, right? In one way, shape or form. We haven't all developed hydrogen cars, and not everyone's driving a Tesla. Although by Tesla's stock price, you'd think that everybody in the world had a Tesla at the moment. So maybe it'll be a Tesla, not an Aston Martin, mate. But maybe it just sounds like an Aston Martin. So what we could potentially see in the US is actually the market, not necessarily as a whole moving significantly upward, but different segments within that market actually having significant return increases. And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning when you and I first started filming these, about equity markets now. Like when times are good, when we have unprecedented times of economic prosperity, which is what we had. We had 40 years of it. Then we had the GFC. Then we had unprecedented prosperity given the amount of debt that the world had. And now we've had an unprecedented event of COVID. But when we hit this COVID, I said that index investing, while yes, will probably give you a trend, but if you're actually willing to play a bit of a medium-term game and have a look at specific sectors within markets, that's where significant opportunity is going to arise. So I don't know exactly where the US is going to go. I think we're going to see some rise and falls, but I think that there's going to be, if the GDP figures are correct, energy sector, healthcare sector, the travel sector, when that kicks, that's going to kick like a bull.
Yeah.
Right? And I was talking about psychology today when I was giving Dan the Man Andrews a good old verbal bashing, and I've been a big supporter of him, but he put us back into jail, so I've come out swinging. But we're going to see, as markets start to trade more normally, and as Australia, and remember, we're in Dale down here, but the rest of Australia is actually getting back to more normalcy. So we'll start to see some of those suppressed sectors start to really kick. And so if we start to see more flights and more domestic travel, get ready for Qantas to go through the roof, get ready for Sydney airports to go through the roof. You know, when everybody is so fearful about going to the stocks, that's when you should be looking at these things. And well, so
I agree. But if I had to forward, and I don't do much of this, but if I had to forwardcast what was going to happen, forecast the events, I would base it on what happened here in Melbourne with toilet paper. Because the first time we went down, and I hate bringing this up, but
Did you have a look in the shed when you got here? You
No.
saw the 17 pallets of toilet paper.
Yeah.
So he's having a shot at me, Jay. He's having a shot at me.
So everyone's gone out and done that, which is a really like stupid act in my thing. But there's been so many lessons in what's happened lately. But I still believe that people are not taking the lessons, because as soon as Melbourne went back into lockdown, the first thing that people did was go out and buy frigging toilet paper again. And I'm sitting back thinking, this is frigging serious. So based on that mentality, the moment that we reopen and things get back to whatever we think is normal, I can't see, and I'm talking off the cuff, but I can't see why we wouldn't return to quite a normal, like a bounce back, because we think there's been lessons learned. Like I'm looking out my window and I'm seeing dolphins in the bay. I saw a whale in the bay here in Mornington, in Melbourne, in winter, just like unheard of. So we're thinking we're learning all these lessons, but yeah, none of us are. There's no lessons being learned. So unfortunately, I feel that we will go back and do the same dumb shit as soon as we get out of here. And that in itself will mean that people will go back to doing what they're doing. And off we go, which is a shame, because there's some really fundamental lessons to be learning in this sort of stuff.
This is the big argument at the moment. And this is the reason why I'm not the biggest fan of Dan the Man at the moment, is that fundamental human psychology, right? Or animal psychology. You put an animal into a cage and you starve it of integration with other animals, and you provide it with a certain amount of isolation. When you open that cage, what does a dog do? Goes freaking berserk, tears your arm off, runs around the paddock, destroys everything. People are not that different. No. You lock people up and you constrain them for 6 weeks. Yeah. And, we're lucky enough to be, I think, in the, maybe just...
I reckon people are probably more stupid, if I've got to be honest. I reckon we're more
top
stupid.
90% of the population's intelligence, maybe. But
and we're still freaking stupid. So like it's going to be the same dumb shit.
You do that, and behavioural psychology tells you without a shadow. Every behavioural psychologist will go, "This is what's going to happen." Yeah. So they're listening to the medicos and the statisticians, and they're looking. They're not dealing with they're dealing with people. And what does people do? As soon as they can see their family, bang, 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 bang. My brother can never be sick. They're trying. 20-year-olds are throwing parties. I can't mention where I went, but I went to a professional the other day. It looked a little bit better, don't I? And she was a young, beautiful lady, and she's got, I'm a 24-year-old red-blooded woman. As soon as they open up the gates, I'm out there. I'm into it. Yeah. And
no, you're right.
This is human psychology. This is human behaviour. Yeah. And to think that we're going to operate any different, it's actually the definition of insanity.
And we're all reacting different. Like for me, I was telling Andy before, like aside from the health issues, obviously we don't want people being sick or people dying in particular, but like there's aspects of this that have actually appealed. Like, and we all respond differently. I have one daughter that's going insane because she's very social. She can't go out and have a drink because she's going berserk. Yeah. My other daughter that's a bit like me that doesn't give a shit, so she doesn't have to deal with people, and it's fantastic. She's loving it. So, there's such a diverse things going on. That
some of the gifts in COVID in that way, isn't it? Just yeah.
But like there's lessons for us all in that as well. How to spend time by yourself, how to reintegrate.
Yeah, for me, like I've, and this is why I said it's been like a fast forward button, because it's made stuff happen that perhaps would have taken 2 years to happen, has happened in 2 months. But on the other side, there's been like a pause button, because it's without all the socialising that's been locked down, it allows you to catch up on other aspects of life and do other stuff. And it's almost like a working holiday where you get to catch up on life and you can embrace it and show gratitude for that side of it. So there's the goods and the bads, but personally, I've actually enjoyed the concept. I just, it's been okay. But I know some that are going absolutely feral. And the moment that the lockdown gets eliminated, it'll be back to what it was before, and then some. So, and I'm thinking that perhaps property and everything else is going to be similar, that it'll go back to what it was and then some. There may be some longer term effects, because I'm not financial guru by any stretch of the imagination, but
financial markets now largely are psychology.
Yep.
You know, and they call it now the psychology.
I mean, really, there's plenty of money in the world, Andy. You know, but where's that money run to when it's scared or afraid of, you know, being lost, eliminated, or whatever it might be? You know, so instead of
there was a question I was going to ask the two of you, because I'm not too sure how this works, because I'm not I'm not a financial.
This was the only thing you did prepare. Brace yourself.
No, I'm not a financial thing, but we hear all the different countries, the governments, you know, like Scott Morrison, 150 billions of dollars and this and that, and USA spending this. So all this money that's theoretically, like, if the whole world's doing it, where's the inequality in it? Like, what stops the world from printing money, provided that it's all done? So if one nation's not, like if it's just Australia and we're printing money, obviously inflation kicks in or whatever it is and we get out of whack. But when it's happening throughout the whole world, so the whole world owes trillions of billions, quadrillions, I don't even know the numbers, and everybody prints money and gets back and neutralises it. Let's square off with the whole world.
Yep.
So where's the impact? I need to understand that, because I've thought about that sort of big picture stuff, and I can't answer it because I don't know it, but maybe you can shed some light on what happens. Like these loans, for argument's sake, why can't each country like write off $200 trillion or something and go back to where we were? I'm asking that from a personal point of view. I'm curious. I'm just curious.
Well, I was talking about this the other day. Like, you know, I personally think it's on the cards. They go, like, listen, everybody, like, you know, the COVID thing, kind of like, let's just, is everyone cool? We just like pretend it didn't happen, right? Just rub a bit off the balance sheet, you know, like, you know, we all had to do it.
Hang on, Brazil. You printed a little bit more.
Not too
Why
much.
can't it happen? Like, I don't actually understand the fundamentals of. I know that I'm over, God knows, oversimplifying it, but in a general sense, like, where do we all end up?
So, it's a great question.
That's your question, Andy. Over to you, mate. Through to the keeper, that one.
Well, so, I'm going to take you down a journey.
Don't take too long, Andy. Don't take too long. I want to go to the toilet.
Well, it's a long story, so I'll cut it short. But when I came back to Australia and I didn't really know what to do with my life, I was still studying, because I've studied every single year of my life. I've maybe taken 1 year off. And when I was born, obviously, I wasn't studying. And after I quit the investment banking, for a period of time, I was thinking about going and doing my doctorate. And so what we're now talking about was actually what my doctorate was about.
Really?
Or what my thesis was about, which was going to then, you know, be the doctorate. But then, you know, can you imagine me, the economist? Fucking hell, that'd be hilarious, wouldn't it? Jesus, yeah. I just like the idea of calling myself Dr. Fenton. But so
got a good ring to it. Got a good ring to it. I'll call you Dr. Fenton if you like.
Yeah, different story. Got the stethoscope. So I called it the velocity of money. But it wasn't a prediction of what's happening now, but it was, and we've talked about it in different terms in Wine and Wisdom. And so if we go back to when debt first started, think about the spice trade. They built a boat. They got money from different areas. They built a boat. The boat sailed around the world, came back with an exchange of spices that through their trade route. That was the first form of debt funding the boat to go around. And when it came back, they sold all the produce. The merchants got their bit, the ships, and then the bankers of those days, which was the royalty, got their money back. Now, it used to take, you know, a year, sometimes 2 years, and sometimes you'd lose a ship. But the velocity of money was very slow. So you could only handle so much debt. Now, as we progressed in through the industrial age and so on and so forth, so we had the whole checking. You're old enough for checks, right? You used to write out a few dodgy checks in your day.
I still do it.
Yeah. Still the old.
I almost cried. I know that they're phasing out, but I love them.
The old.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just go to the bank and put it in.
Yeah. Wait until that one bounces. Yeah, not negotiable. And so there used to be a transactional time that used to take place. And only over the last 5 or so years, and let's say it's literally the last 5 or so years, money is now transferring. The banking system is now starting to get into real-time transfers. Like 10 years ago, if you wanted a real-time transfer, you had to pay $35 for it. You had to sign it. You had to provide certified identification, have money actually go from one place to the next place instantaneously. Now, in microseconds, we're exchanging money from one side of the planet to the other side.
Yeah.
Which gives you the ability to maintain far greater debt levels. Because if you think about having to manage your capital adequacy, so the amount of capital that you've got for the amount of loans that are out, well, if the money pings backwards and forwards super, super quick, well, in theory, you're maintaining it. But at any microsecond, you may be significantly out. And so we've got the 24-hour cash rate, which is effectively the interbank lending. So when a bank runs out of money to give to other people, it borrows money off the bank, which it might have actually lent, just given all its money to.
Okay.
So Enio goes, Andy, can you please transfer that $7 billion back to me that you owe me from the other night that we went out in Vegas? And I go, yes, Enio. Goes from Westpac to ANZ. And Westpac goes, oh, shit, I don't have any money left. So it goes to ANZ and borrows the money back.
I would have ANZ.
A and B.
NAB.
And it transfers back. So that's been around for quite some time. But so the thesis was around, well, can we, given the fact that money can travel faster, does that not mean that we can sustain far greater levels of debt? And that was what the whole thesis was about. And this was sort of coming out of the GFC. And I think that what we're seeing now is actually that rationalization. And there's a normal point, and to give you the most basic example of it, is that yes, the markets are an ecosystem and they will balance out based on terms of trade and the amount of money in the system. And those, it'll take a little bit of time for it to understand where it sits. But when you've gone to Brazil, or when you've gone to Thailand in the day, and sometimes I think it might have even been Malaysia. Do you ever get those like $7 million notes, and they just had the last six crossed off it? Really? Have you ever been there? No. So the new currency, no word of a lie, the new currency would have 7,000. Let's call it rupee. It's completely wrong because it's not the currency, but 7,000 rupee. Well, 7,000 rupee was in the new note, but the old note was still in circulation. And the old note was 7 million. And they just took out the last 6 zeros, or 700 million, or no, 7 billion or whatever it was. They took out the extra zeros and they exchanged the note in the same terms of trade. So
there you go. So the $150 billion stimulus could be $150, but he got it wrong by only $70.
but Andy,
but I'm talking take off the zeros, and you do that around the whole world.
And that is a natural balancing act, which will actually happen over time, apart from countries like Russia, apart from countries like China, because you just can't believe the shit that they print, because they'll tell you that they've done one thing and they've just done completely the opposite. But yes, that is actually the ecosystem automatically calibrating to itself.
So why is such a dumb question?
No, it's an incredible question.
But also too, we talked about this before. The cost of that debt, we chatted about it before. Like the cost of money is so low. If you and I, like I'm just talking for myself here. Like if I could have access to $1 million tomorrow and it cost me 1%, and I can make 10% every day of the week, I'd borrow the shit out of that thing. Give me the cash. And I wonder if that's where we're going with this stuff. Like the stock market was created because there was excess capital in the world and it needed a home to be, right? And then, all right, well. Yep. And so then, I wonder if that's where we are globally right now. Like there's no such thing as the cost of capital, like as in interest. That's gone, that's over, interest is gone, but now money's got to work. So where are we going to get it from? It has to be invested. I don't know. Interesting times.
Well, I've always fundamentally believed, and we've talked about the analogy a few times, is that in my world, the world is flat. right? It's a contour map, and it has corners and it has borders from a monetary perspective. It's pre-Columbus, right? And money is when you grab on the contoured map, you pour the money into the system, and then you rotate it. And the money will flow to where the gravity is. And for me, that's a good analogy to talk about. Yeah, it's pulling the table over in the corner. That's to me that's effectively how the system actually works. Is that money doesn't want to be stored so much as money wants to be utilized. And if you take old Kerwin, one of our mates' analogies, he talks about it. Money is energy; it's a byproduct of what. But energy doesn't like to be stored. We know that because batteries don't work that well, and they may never, it wants to be distributed and it wants to be utilized and put into productive areas. And I think that's what we're just seeing.
Yeah,
we're seeing money now starting to get going, you know what? I can't be held in a battery anymore. I need to be working.
Yeah.
And I need to be distributed.
Oh, but it's interesting. 33 years in business, and you could. I don't remember the interest rates being at this level in all that.
Oh, they never have.
They never have been. No. So, how do the banks in time put them up without bankrupting everybody?
That's the $1 billion question.
It's the government. It's the government putting them up. If the banks put them up, it creates extraordinary opportunity for other people to come in and be a better market.
Well, here's a question. Here's a question right now. Why do we need banks? We have blockchain. Why can't we just all be part of the banking system worldwide? And if I need some money, I can borrow it from you, Ennio, instead of the bank being the middleman and causing all sorts of fucking grief. So that technology exists today, right now. And part of the interesting conversation around this stuff, and it messes my head up when you say, well, if the world could just have this slush fund in the blockchain right now, and we could all be lending and everyone could get money for what they need, and it would be fair and there wouldn't be any banking, and imagine a world like that. And maybe it's never going to happen because the control systems are going to lock it down, but maybe what happens if it does? Maybe the bigger question is, do we need banking? Do we need banks to lend us money, or can we just lend it to each other because it could be a fairer system and get them out of the way? I don't know. It's a big question there, isn't it? In that sort of space. But listen, it's been a good conversation tonight, boys. I might have to
just on that, mate.
Yeah.
There is already many of them in the sandbox at the moment.
Yeah.
There's already many of them in the sandbox. Yeah.
Good conversation. But Andy, you mentioned we might sort of pull apart the new stimulus next week and Wine and Wisdom. So new stimulus conversations coming through.
Yep.
Yeah, which is
job trainer. And I'm going to throw another hat moment there, and I'm going to say there's going to be some more stimulus. So there's these boys can't help themselves. When they get on a roll, they just end up with great ideas, and they're going to save the world. So job trainer. We'll have a look at the movie stimulus. We'll call it the movie stimulus, and I'm sure that there'll be another one that'll be coming out soon because.
Job trainer, what they call the job maker as well, or something.
Job maker. They're looking at the trainees and stuff like that, which is good. Yeah.
This is where they're selecting markets that they're going to give money to.
Stimulate.
And this is just the final little bash before you go to the toilet, Jace. This is what shits me about when the government start to deploy funds. They go, well, let's start to sink a whole lot of money into biomedical because at the moment we're in a pandemic. But when there's a fucking cure, we're not going to be in a pandemic anymore. We'll be in a season where that happens. And then the medical industry might not see anything like this for the next 100 years. But the government will have thrown so much money into this sector that we'll have a million unemployed scientists who know how to solve every genetic chain under the sun. So,
but my forte, even from Victoria's point of view, I think that really, if the government's going to sit back and throw a little bit more at it, it really needs to assist the industries that have been crippled, the hospitality, the travel, the gyms, fitness, these sort of industries that have been just squashed and closed.
Yeah.
They might need to sort of make perhaps a fairer sort of system going
Anyhow,
forward. But
they're going to change the world. They've all of a sudden started to look into the future.
But that's okay. Like I said, I've never received money from the government, so it's unheard of. It's just one of the best clients ever.
There was one quick question.
Thanks, mate.
Okay.
Appreciate you being a guest on today's show as well, mate. It is a very pleasant surprise having you here, mate, and awesome to hear, you know, some of your wisdom, mate. You said not much wisdom and not much wine, but, mate, I think you added a lot of wisdom tonight. It's great to see, you know, stories from real businesses and real people out there who've had, you know, real life experiences like you have, mate. So appreciate you adding some value tonight. And I know there were some good comments from people tonight about your feedback and your words. So thank you, mate. Appreciate you being on.
No, thank you. It was just as much a surprise to me as it was to you, mate.
You were sprung on it 10 minutes early. You did well, mate. Thank you very much. And Andy, brother,
a month's notice.
Yeah, he saw me driving past.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone listening in. We've had a bunch of people glued on it tonight. So thanks, everyone. Great to have everyone dialing in. And till next week, Andy. Andy, thank you.
Thank you.
Later, lads. Have a good one. Have a great weekend. Bye, all.
Good night, mate.
Night.
Good night.